Hey everybody, it's Blair Johnson with the Badass Records podcast, inviting you to join in on the weekly fun. New episodes of this pod drop Thursdays around 6 a.m. You can subscribe or keep tabs wherever you catch your podcast audio. There's a YouTube channel. Socials are Twitter and Instagram. If you want to join me for an episode, it's badassrecordspodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to peruse the site and maybe get yourself some merch, it's badassrecordspodcast.com. We're dropping episodes every week, talking people, music, and badass records. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope you enjoy the show. We are doing episode 112 of Badass Records Podcast. Is it Bauman?
Bauman.
Bauman. Zach?
I think our family pronounces it wrong, probably, but we go Bauman.
Zach
so,
Bauman.
Yeah.
Very nice to meet you.
You as well.
Appreciate you being here.
Sure thing.
Carving out a little portion of your nice weather Saturday.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Much appreciated.
Happy to be here.
Let's see here. ZachBphotography.com.
Yeah.
Zach B Photograph on Twitter.
Yep.
And then just Zach Bauman on Instagram, right?
Yep, that's me.
Are there other spots?
I think that's mostly it. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not super active on Twitter, just kind of a lurker there. But
I know the feeling. The feeling. I came across an article that had, in getting ready, something to do with an infinite playlist on the pitch.
Yeah.
But I feel like I initially came across you because the pitch credited you for a photo for one of their posts from a couple months ago, but I can't remember what it was about. Like December-ish, maybe?
Gosh, I can't. I did some photographs for like their best of issue a while back.
Okay.
And I used to shoot quite a bit for the pitch. Like I actually got my start doing concert photography for them back in the day.
Oh, wow, really?
Like about 10 years ago or so.
Okay.
And so I've shot quite a bit for them, so I'm actually not sure what it would have been, but
Okay.
it might have been food related because I do a lot of food photography.
You know what? That might be it.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly why, but first of all, I love the pitch. I always have.
Yeah.
I used to look forward to the hard copy coming out on Thursdays and go to the record store and get it and find out shows and see album reviews and whatnot. But their digital content of late, and I'm not saying that it was different before, but I've just more recently become aware of their digital content, and it's like it almost doesn't matter what they're posting about on Instagram. The photos are always nice and the copy is always clean, and they always attribute the photographer and the writer, and then at the bottom of every post, if you want to see the whole thing, never a paywall. It's just all really attractive. So I saw a post in December, and it might have been food related, and it just led me to go comb. I felt like they were really cranking out a bunch of posts in December as kind of an end of year thing.
Yeah.
So I just was like, if I come across a photographer or a writer that's credited, I'm going to reach out to them and see if they want to come sit with me.
I was kind of wondering how I was on your radar.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, but then again, the infinite playlist thing, that's not quite as recent as the thing I came across, correct?
Yeah, I think that was maybe... Gosh, I feel like it was maybe 9 months ago, maybe a year. Time's kind of weird right now for everyone. But yeah, it wasn't super long ago.
Okay.
But yeah, so I just put together a few songs I've been listening to. Honestly, I don't even remember what songs I put on there at this point.
But the pitch knew you, and you knew the pitch from doing stuff previously.
Yeah. So I've got a pretty long-standing relationship with them because they were like the first folks that were hired me to take photos in Kansas City. So I've been, shooting for them for, I guess, around a decade now.
Cool.
So
Very
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
And you mentioned just a little bit ago that you were out in California doing also for work stuff?
No,
or?
this is just kind of for fun.
Oh, okay.
My girlfriend's best friends live out there, so we just kind of went out and hung out for a while and kind of we're all over the place. Got to check out like Amoeba Records. Never been there. It's a new
Nice.
location, but it's still very cool.
Yeah.
It's huge, which I didn't realize it was that large. And I mean, they were just rocking in there. I mean, there were so many people in there. It was pretty wild.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Is this L.A. or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just right down in Hollywood.
Okay.
So yeah.
Anytime I'm elsewhere outside of Kansas City and I've flown to wherever I am, if I get out and shop, I inevitably am like uncontrollably pulled into a record store,
Sure.
and I'm irresponsibly, I've got like, I'm going to buy these 15 records. And
Right.
then it's like, wait a minute. I got to get on a plane, and I only have a carry-on, and a couple times I've had stores been like, "We'll ship them to you."
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
no, actually, I shouldn't spend $350 right now.
Right.
So I'm going to put these down.
I was good. I made it out of there with a Thin Lizzy concert T-shirt, and
Oh,
that
nice.
was it. I didn't
Nice.
buy any records, so
Nice.
I've kind of I was like, all right, I'll get one little thing, and
Sure.
that's it.
Yeah. And so, are you a vinyl guy?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got not a huge collection, maybe 200, 250 records,
It's not
something
small.
like that. Yeah.
Nice. And what does your setup look like for listening it?
So we just got it kind of in the living room. I've got I think it's an MMF record player,
Okay.
and then some old like Technique speakers, and
Sure.
then I've got a little nice receiver. I think it's Onyo is the brand that I found at like a garage sale or maybe at a antique store, something
Okay.
like that a while back.
Now, is this a situation where you're really only playing vinyl on this system, or have you managed to connect Bluetooth?
I don't have anything else dialed
okay.
into it. Yeah,
Okay.
it's only vinyl.
Okay.
So yeah.
So more or less, you're hanging out in that room if you're listening.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, and
okay.
so it's just kind of like right in our living room. So it's set up like right next to the TV and everything too.
Cool.
So it's nice and comfy.
Cool. So are you born and raised in the area?
I'm originally from Marion, Kansas. It's central Kansas, kind of by Wichita.
Okay.
And so I grew up there. It's a tiny town of about 2,000 people. It's actually come to a little bit of fame last summer. It was our newspaper that was raided, that made like national headlines or whatever, because like the police department raided the newspaper. So it was a big like thing to do with free speech.
RAIDED or
Yeah.
I'm thinking RATED.
No, they raided the newspaper and like
that feels a little familiar.
yeah, and so it was like in the New York Times, and like it made national news, and it's still kind of a big deal. And,
Why?
Well, because they were investigating the police chief who actually came from Kansas City. And so they were kind of investigating him, and
Like he was police chief in Kansas City and moved to Marion?
well,
or
he was just like I think a sergeant or something
Okay.
here, and then moved to Marion for the police chief job, even though I think it was about a $60,000 pay cut to do so. And so I think he
Wow.
maybe left here allegedly under not so great circumstances.
Interesting.
But then they said that basically there was a local woman that the paper was kind of investigating over a license issue, and they said that they illegally obtained information about her and violated some laws in that capacity. And typically,
The
if
police did.
yeah, but they also knew that the newspaper was kind of investigating the police chief because of his past up here, and so there was a whole lot of stuff happening.
Whoa.
And
That's wild.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and like he ended up resigning, and I think he's like in Hawaii now or something
He
like
just
that.
keeps moving west.
Yeah, very far west.
Oh, they're on my trail again.
But yeah, so there's a lot happening. So that was that's my hometown of about
Wow.
2,000
Okay.
people.
Okay.
And so, but from there I kind of bounced around a little bit. I went to Emporia State for a little while.
Right
I lived
on.
in Manhattan, Kansas for a couple years, and then I was in Wichita for about 8 years, and then I've been in Kansas City.
Okay.
For,
What were you studying at Emporia?
Just not much.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of, it was like, well, I just turned 18. I guess it's time to go to school. Hadn't quite figured it out yet. And so just kind of bounced around a
Right
little
on.
bit. And then
Right on.
at one point when I was at Wichita State, I was going into like television production a little bit. I worked on like the Shocker News show one semester.
Okay.
And so,
Cool.
yeah, and then ended up.
Yeah, I did Pittsburgh State.
Oh, cool.
For 1 year.
Yeah.
And it just, kind of grew up loving KU and going to Lawrence a lot in high school, and partying, and felt like things wouldn't go well if now I live in Lawrence, and
Right.
So I kind of was like Emporia, Pittsburgh, and ended up anyway. But came to the conclusion that both are very fine schools.
Yeah, yeah.
Emporia, I think, is a teacher.
Yeah, kind of a teacher. Like, I think it started off strictly as a teacher's college, and then it's still known for that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right on. You have siblings?
I do. I have a sister and 2 stepbrothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any idea how mom and dad met?
Well, so my parents are divorced, but my mom and stepdad met at just like kind of a party at a friend's house.
Okay.
In, I don't know, like 35 years ago or something
Right.
like that. So yeah.
So how old were you when mom and dad went their separate ways?
I think I was like in second grade.
Second
like
grade.
7 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So were you under their roof long enough to have any memories of? Did they put on music to listen to in the home, or
A little bit,
Okay.
yeah. So my dad, we had like a stereo with like records and CDs and tapes. I think it's probably tapes at that time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they both have record collections. Like I have records from both of them now.
Okay.
And so yeah, a lot of like Linda Ronstadt and the Eagles and things of the 70s,
Yes.
mid 70s
Yes.
era. Yeah.
nice? And then at some point, it's like when we're little people, the music that our parents own is that's what we hear.
Yeah.
Outside of the radio or being in the car or whatever. But at some point, we sort of veer down this path of forming our own tastes, our own.
Sure.
So I'm curious if there was an album that you first fell in love with, or bought with your own money, or anything that stands out from early on.
Well, I remember getting a couple of cassettes for a birthday, and they were, I think it was a Beatles record with Back in the USSR on
Nice.
it. I think, is that the White Album? And then also U2 Rattle and Hum, which is something I probably wouldn't listen to now, but I enjoyed it with, when I was like 9 or 10 years old or however. So
Yeah.
those were a couple. A funny memory is going into Kmart with my grandma, and she bought me Motley Crue, Decade of Decadence. And so she was always cool. She had, her own albums and stuff at her house too. So that was always kind of
Nice.
cool. Yeah.
Now, how long have you had your turntable and your vinyl collection?
So my first turntable that I got would have been probably like 2005-ish.
Okay.
And so how that came about was I was on the Sub Pop website, and I accidentally purchased the Band of Horses, their first album. I thought I was buying a CD, and I bought the vinyl.
Oh, I see.
And so I needed a record player, and my other grandma actually had one of those big old console record players.
Yeah.
And so when I was home, I took that back, and that was the start of my listening
Now
to records.
you live with your girlfriend?
Yeah.
And is she into music? And...
She is. She's a huge Wilco fan. That's her band. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Especially as it pertains to your list, which we'll get into. So do you guys find that your tastes relatively swim in the same stream?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so do you take turns putting on what you're going to listen to if you're just relaxing at home?
Yeah, we try to. You know how that goes, especially like if you're on Spotify or something like that, where you can't wait to get your next song on there. And so we try and do it as democratic as possible. Sometimes one of us will end up hogging it a little bit more than the other.
Yeah.
And that would probably be me, unfortunately.
But speaking of, I was turned on to a massive Spotify playlist a few years ago, and it's really all I listen to. Now I don't pay for Spotify, so Shuffle is the only option I've got. And so that's what plays typically in my kitchen, and if I hear something cool, then I'll add it to my what I do pay. And it's so like when year wrap, end of year, those what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking 24/7, 365. This playlist is playing, and only it's 600 albums and 10,500 hours worth of music. So I may have made it all the way through it once, but usually it only restarts if like the Wi-Fi goes out or I intentionally want to listen to something. So my stats would be just bananas,
That's what I found on mine this year is like I found that my Wrapped was total garbage just from like playlists and things like that to where it's like this isn't the artist that if I'm listening to a record that I'm predominantly listening to. And so I
2 years in a row, Calexico. I'm like,
wow.
I don't even know that band.
Yeah. And like one year I had Gorillaz, a Gorillaz album was like my most listened to. And I was like, I don't recall ever listening to this record once. I like Gorillaz, but I wasn't listening to them at the time.
So it was a thing of beauty for a couple of years. And then Spotify probably, looks at numbers and analyzes things. And because when it will pause for an ad break, like most of the ads are Spotify trying to get me to pay for premium.
Oh, gotcha.
And now there'll be a couple other ones sprinkled in, but they hit it hard all the time. And so eventually, like I said, after like a year and a half, 2 years, all of a sudden this playlist would start pausing. And so you have to go over and it would pause on an ad. And they've even this past calendar year, they even made another change to where like if I'm on it long enough and working through the pause kink that it'll just freeze and I'll have to like exit out of Spotify and listen to something else before I can go back in.
Interesting.
And so, and part of the, so when I do that now, it'll restart. Now the shuffle sequence of tracks is it's random, right? But ever since one of these changes that they made, if I exit out of it and come back in and restart the thing, it always starts with the general specific Band of Forces.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
Every single time I restart that playlist, it's just like fucking this song. Oh my god!
You're over that one.
Yeah. It's anyway. So what about shows? Did you get dragged or willingly go to any concerts as a young person?
I'm trying to think. So the very first concert that I went to was with my dad, and it was Lynyrd Skynyrd, Bad Company, and Driving and Crying.
Oh wow!
And so that would have been
Me Courageous.
Yeah, that's the one. So that was the first show that I went to, but my dad did try to take me to the Stones and the Who when they were at Arrowhead, I think in like '89 or something. But my mom kind of was like, maybe not quite yet,
Okay.
So that would have been a cooler show to say was my first show, but that the truth is it was Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yeah.
So.
So mom and stepdad have been together 35 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And what is he into? What's stepdad into?
Well, he and actually, he recently just passed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that's okay. But he, going through his records and stuff, like I found like a couple old Hendrix records.
Oh, wow.
And some things of that nature. But they kind of listened to like, I mean, looking at what my mom had on last time I was home was like Yo-Yo Ma or something like that.
Wow.
So it's pretty kind of eclectic.
Yeah.
And so,
Right
a
on.
little bit of this, a little bit of that. Yeah.
Shouts out to mom.
Yeah. But she also has like some other stuff like the Britney Alabama Shakes, I think. They had some of that.
Yeah.
So kind of all over the place.
Cool.
Yeah.
So photography is kind of your jam or what you do for a living.
Yeah.
And also a passion.
For sure, yeah.
And when did you first realize that was a thing
So I got into that. I needed an elective course as a freshman in high school, and
Is this Wichita?
this is in Marion.
Oh, okay.
And so my parents had like the old, I don't remember if it was my mom or my dad still had it, but an old Canon AE1 little 35 millimeter film camera. And so I got into it in high school, and I
Cool.
took art classes, mostly photography based, all 4 years in high school. And then I was kind of considering going that direction, for college, but coming from a tiny town that didn't really seem like an obtainable thing. It's like, oh my gosh, you can be a photographer, for a living. That didn't really seem like a real thing. And so I kind of revisited it, like, I don't know, the late aughts maybe.
Okay.
I kind of and started to teach myself the digital end of things.
Yeah.
And then kind of
So you
progressed
in
that
high
way.
school, you're film and darkroom and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the techniques.
all that. Like we had one, like digital had just kind of started, and
Oh,
I remember
wow.
we had a digital camera that had, I think 1 megabyte was the size of the, as large as it could go,
Yeah.
as far as the, um, excuse me, the being able to print and all that stuff. It was much different, and so it was all film basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was it like? Were you intimidated at all trying to dip your toes in the digital waters, or was it like, oh, I got this, I got this?
I mean, a little bit, but it just kind of slowly progressed, and so it was just, it's still fairly similar to the film stuff as far as like your settings and things like that.
Okay.
It's not too much different. But then, especially with YouTube and then, there's blogs and stuff like that out there, you just kind of find a couple of people that you gravitate towards, like this other photographer, Zach Arias, who's kind of known as an educator. I followed him and read a lot of his blog and a few others.
Cool.
And so you can just kind of learn that way, and you get, really into like, oh, this gear is going to make me so much better and all that stuff. And like now I don't really even pay attention to that, but
Okay.
it's just a whole, different kind of
Now,
progression.
Have you managed to retain all of the, old school film developing and
No.
like if somebody's like, here, shoot this for me tomorrow, you'd be like, I'm gonna have to brush up first.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I haven't been in a dark room in 20 years,
Dang.
so it's been a while. I do want to kind of get back into it, because there is like I don't know, there's a sexiness to that. It's
sure.
cool, and like I had so many great years just like listening to music in the high school dark room and developing and enlarging prints and that type of thing. And so I mean, I do miss that. But yeah, if I were to do that now, like I still have like some film cameras and stuff that I'll shoot on very occasionally, but I mean, I'm still just like, I'll take them to get processed or
Yeah.
send them in to get processed or whatever. So.
I mean, it's not, you don't, I guess just looking through the lens of the internet, you don't see it a lot, but I know it's still out there in pockets.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And there are folks that, are kind of diehards or swear by it. And why do you suppose that they would, cling to that as opposed to just being like, you know what, the digital is, I don't know, easier.
It's I think it's because it's a little bit more tactile. It's just like, you're really hands on, and then there is that whole, the mystique of the dark room is
Yes.
kind of cool. And then I mean, it does have a different look to it. Like the grain of the film looks a little bit different than how it would like for a digital image and
For
things
sure.
like that. And so, and it also, you have to slow down your process when making a photo. And so, if you've only got 24 shots on your roll, you have to be more mindful of what you're
can't
shooting.
just-
Like, and I mean, there, with digital, I mean, you can still do that. Storage space is a whole different issue,
Right,
but
right.
but you can certainly like go wild and like, oh, I took 2,000 images at this wedding or whatever, and then you have to sort through all of
That's,
them. And
that's, I'm glad you said that, because that's immediately where I go thinking about doing, and it's like, I know we're all responsible for, managing our own impulses and the way that we perceive things. But when there's that many, like to mindfully and thoughtfully look at one image and sort of take it in and process it and then move to the next and then move to my mind, my 2024 mind with this big of an attention span just starts skipping and scanning, and it's like you're going to miss a lot. I would think if you're not mindfully studying each one It's a skill. I would think it's a skill to find.
Yeah, you kind of get to where you're culling through those images fairly quickly, and like maybe during the shoot, like for me, I have shots that stand out to me, and so I'm definitely not always the most efficient because I want to see those shots first, which probably isn't, other photographers maybe cringing when they hear it, but like I want to go, and so I'm not very efficient with my process.
Okay.
But you should cull through those images and just kind of, you flag the ones that or rate the ones that you are into initially.
Now, is this your sole source of income, or is it a side thing? Or?
No, this is, pretty much it. I do a little bit of work with Hawk Contemporary, an art gallery down in the West Bottoms, but that's pretty minimal. I help out with them like every couple times a month.
Most of the work that you're doing, you have to find yourself, or somebody finds you.
Yeah.
And
sure.
So, what was starting that process like to get, going, and then the website built, and then the social media presence and the reputation and all that? Was it hard?
It was hard and kind of slow. And so I did have initially, I was working at a pharmaceutical company like 10 years ago, and so I was there when I started doing a few things for the pitch, shooting like, the concerts is kind of where I started. And then over time, I kind of built a website, picked up gigs and just shooting different things and kind of grinding it out. I've had, I worked at Mills Records for a short time as like a kind of a part-time gig when I was starting out as well. And so it's always nice because knowing that you're going to have some steady income, because in the photography game, even now, like it's pretty up and
seasonally,
down. Yeah. Like the last couple months have been pretty slow, but like the end of the year was just,
banging.
Yeah, for sure. And so even now it's kind of all over the place.
So when you were doing concert stuff for the pitch, were they telling you the shows?
Yeah, so I wasn't like pitching anything to them for the most part. If a show came up that I really wanted to shoot, I could be like, I want to, shoot this one for sure. But they would typically kind of tell me what they were after, because they would have, someone writing a review for it or something like that.
So, if this is since this is your only gig, you've got, scheduling shoots, doing shoots, the afterward, the production of the shoot, the delivering of the end product to the customer, and then I imagine there's maybe some invoicing and office-y kinds of things that you have to do.
Yeah.
What else fills your? Are you trying to promote yourself, get yourself out there to new customers, or what else do you do?
Yeah, and so like recently I've kind of joined like this site. It's found.com, and it's about different artists, and so they kind of will promote you to different like creative agencies, both nationally and internationally, and things like that, and they put together a little bit of a portfolio for you. And so that's
FOUND found?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
And so I've recently kind of signed up for that service and see how that goes.
It's not free, is it?
It's not free,
right?
No. And so but I typically have mostly been kind of word of mouth. But I figure, try to level up a little bit, and maybe get on some radars of some other folks, maybe outside of town a little bit more.
Cool.
So yeah.
Folks are not ponying up for your airfare yet. Come out to Seattle for my bar mitzvah or whatever.
Yeah, not just yet.
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. But
right.
Hey, man. At one point in Marion, you're like, I don't think I can do that for a living.
Yeah.
So
we're
maybe you're in Tokyo this time next year.
That's right. Small incremental steps for sure.
Well, thank you again for being here, and I appreciate you sending me a list, which was, like I said, very fascinating. And I typically just run through them in chronological order of release, so we'll go back to 1967, Velvet Underground and Nico.
Yeah.
Let's see here. First of 5 for them. I, until sitting down for this, have thought that they only had 4 records for years.
Oh, right.
And then I saw Squeeze. It was the last one.
Was that like their like a 1985 release or something like that? I feel like there was kind of like an odd one.
Maybe.
At the end, maybe.
But I always thought it was Velvet Underground, Nico, self-titled, Loaded, and White Light, White Heat.
Right.
I never Squeeze. Anyway, this one's 11 tracks, 47 minutes. I have not knowing until, again, sitting down, I've sort of had this longing to try and get somebody to distill the essence of what makes the Velvet Underground awesome. And so I'm going to put you on the spot and see if you can do it.
Yeah, well, I'll see what I can come up with here. So what I kind of like about them is that they have like these kind of beautiful pop songs, especially this record, but then it's kind of deconstructed a little bit. And like in this record, John Cao's kind of on the viola, and there's almost like a haunting or a droning sound throughout a lot of the songs.
Yeah.
And I like that. I feel like they're one of the, first bands to kind of do that. And Wilco is one now that, like, they're some of their earlier records where they're making these great songs and then they're kind of just pulling them apart a little bit. And I think that's kind of what's interesting about them a little bit. And so a record that I also, Loaded is also a great record.
Yeah.
And I was kind of torn between which record to choose out of the two because Loaded doesn't do that as much. It's a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
And so, but I went with this just because it came ahead of Loaded chronologically, and it's kind of my introduction to the band. And
okay. So, I know I've looked it up before, probably learned it more than once, but old age and memory, there's no forgiveness there. Who is Nico? Do you know?
So I believe she is German, but she's a part of, I think, like Andy Warhol's like roster of artists and people that he worked with, and so he was a big part of this record as well.
Yeah.
And so he brought
the banana.
yeah. I think that he is kind of responsible for her bringing her on board for that, and she's got kind of those, I don't know, almost like a deep baritone, like a strong female voice. That's kind of, it was really cool on the record.
Now, did she ever pop up elsewhere beyond this record?
I feel like she had some solo stuff, but I never really dipped my toes in that water, so to speak.
So Self-Titled and White Light, White Heat, you're familiar with them as well?
Yes.
And enjoy them?
White Light, White Heat, not as much.
Okay.
It's a little bit too kind of frenetic for me, I suppose.
Interesting.
But yeah, so I'm kind of pick and choose, I guess, which one of these records I'm into.
No familiarity with Squeeze.
Not really.
Okay.
No.
I'm glad to not be alone in
that.
No. So, I think that I bought this one. I was a cassette holdout for. I still have hundreds just in the other room, and I think I got this one first. Late college, and threw it on, and I was like, it just kind of droning and didn't really. And I was like, oh,
right.
But I at some point acquired, one or more, and didn't revisit this one for a very long time, and it does stand out. I mean, Loaded is great, but it revisiting it here in recent years, and again for this, it's like, man, I kind of like almost every song. Like, not really a whole lot of skip action in this for me, and it's always funny to think about. If something doesn't jive for you here in this time of your life, and how over here you can be like, this is one of my favorite records.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I didn't come to this record until I was probably in like my late 20s or something like that.
Yeah.
So I certainly wasn't a part of my formative years or anything like that. But yeah, it's pretty on the nose, but I like listening to this record on a Sunday morning while drinking coffee, like hanging out or whatever. It's
as I got this thing off the ground and, whatever, 20, 30, 40 episodes deep, it's kind of like I cannot get away from Wilco. I mean, everybody and their mother is like got Wilco. And the one that it keeps hitting people's lists more often than not is Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, which I've not I haven't crunched the numbers, but I think it's probably tops, meaning it's been on more people's lists than any other.
Right.
But as of right now, today, Sticky Fingers is giving it a run for its money.
Is it?
Yeah, like if, I mean, we're talking neck and neck.
Okay.
So skipping from 67 to 71, 13 to 26 records for the Stones, 10 tracks, 46 minutes. It's and it. I didn't until it hit the first person's list. I didn't realize how many absolute bangers are on this thing. I mean, talk about loaded. It is loaded.
It surely is. I had a hard time also choosing a Stones record, because like that, I don't know, 68 to 72 time period is pretty intense.
Yeah.
They got a lot happening, so I almost like regret is like, oh, should I have said Let It Bleed? Like, because I love both of those records. But this one, I mean, it's got, Brown Sugar, Sway, Wild Horses, great song. I mean, then even at the end of the record, I mean, Dead Flowers and Moonlight Mile, I mean, that's, you're not going to find many records closing out in that kind of fashion,
It's funny that you mentioned that window because I had a guest on, Will Malthrop is his name, and he is something of a photographer as well.
Okay.
He was episode 91 back in October, and he went 4 consecutive Stones records.
Oh, wow.
From that precise window, and that was his whole list.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, oldies was kind of oldies 95, or I'm sorry, WH71 WHB was the AM radio oldie station that I would listen to in my mom's car. She had a few records. My dad was Oak Ridge Boys and John Denver and things of this nature, and on 8-track in his van. But eventually, I kind of wound up in the classic rock camp for a long time, too long.
Right.
And I just, and start building a collection of cassettes, and it's like the body of Rolling Stones that I'm getting from FM radio, I don't really dislike any of it, but I don't love any of it either. So I never, to this day, have purchased a Rolling Stones album.
Okay.
And now I've listened to a bunch of them and have an appreciation for them that I never thought I would have. You know their stuff well enough to have struggled to select this one. How did your affinity for them come to be?
Kind of same, just listening to classic rock or oldies with my dad. I have memories of trying to explain the Rolling Stones to someone when I was 9 years old.
Really?
And we were listening to the radio, and they're like, I don't. And then Get Off My Cloud came on right as we were talking about. That's one of my earliest musical memories.
Interesting.
And so, I've been familiar with them pretty much the entire time that I've been into music. I have more Rolling Stones records than anybody else. I think I've got probably 10 or 11 Rolling Stones records, which I say that, I swear I counted them. That seems high, but I do have I've got Emotional Rescue, Some Girls, and then Beggar's Banquet. I've got most of the good Stones records. So.
And then beyond Some Girls, are there a couple of hidden gems in there, or is it mostly just kind of take it or leave it?
Mostly take it or leave it. I mean, I off of, was it Tattoo? I like Waiting on a Friend. I love that song. Okay. And that's from 81, I think. But that's kind of, I remember Stuck Between a Rock and a Hard Place. I think that was Steel Wheels or something like that. I mean, I remember
that got heavy play.
Yeah,
on FM radio.
I remember just going to my grandma's house in Newton. We didn't have MTV where I grew up, and so when I would go to Newton, Kansas, just be glued to MTV. And I remember that being...
I went through 3 or 4 roommates as a freshman at Pitt State. My very first one was a cat from Newton.
Oh, right on. Yeah, I run into everyone's Newton. It's... But yeah, so I just remember just being glued to, and that one, Rock and a Hard Place, was in pretty heavy rotation then, for sure.
That's good stuff. And then from 1971, we big leap forward all the way to 93 with Siamese Dream.
Yeah.
Smashing Pumpkins, second of 12, 13 tracks, 62 minutes. I had a buddy do an episode with me, and Smashing Pumpkins came up, and he said, they're a frustrating band to be a fan of.
I've heard that.
Okay. What's your introduction story to them, and why is this one?
So for them, I grew up, I graduated high school in 98. So this is around, like 93 when this came out is when I was really kind of forming my own opinions on music. And so that's when, there was grunge and all of that. I wouldn't necessarily consider them a grunge band, but of that era, they're kind of borderline or whatever. But so I got into them. I actually bought the Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral album, and I had a buddy that really wanted that. It was a CD or whatever, and he's like, "I will trade you." It was a cassette tape of Jar of Flies, Alice in Chains, Sap, which is like an EP.
Both of those are EPs.
Yeah, and
Killer, two of the best EPs ever.
And then Gish by Smashing Pumpkins, and so that was kind of my introduction to them.
So what's the transaction again?
I'm trading him Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral compact disc
CD,
for 2 CDs, the Gish CD and Sap, and then also the Jar of Flies cassette tape. And I was like, all right, I think I'm coming out on top here. And so that's how I got into Smashing Pumpkins. And then this record is just, I think, my favorite record of theirs. Like Cherub Rock, like that's like an all-time, like just coming out of the gates swinging.
That one spot.
Yeah, I love this record, and I'm still listening to this. Like,
it's great to put back on.
Yeah, and so this is from that era, the band that I'm revisiting the most. I think that their sound is kind of held up the most in my eyes. Like, I love the guitar tones and all of that, and like Jimmy Chamberlain's drumming rules.
That's my Smashing Pumpkins rule for this podcast. Is if nothing else, when Smashing Pumpkins come up, you gotta give shouts out to Jimmy Chamberlain.
Yeah,
he just kills it.
Yeah, and so those first 2 records for me are awesome. After that, kind of falls off a little bit, like Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. There's some songs in there, but I mean, it's
somebody said that it shouldn't have been a double album.
Yeah, they could have pared that down probably for sure. But I mean, it's got like Zero. I love that song. Bullet for Butterfly Wings or whatever it's called. I like that song. But some of them, like Tonight, I don't care for too much.
Sure. So, this was a thought in my mind, and I didn't realize that it was there until I started seeing stuff that it was like, oh, that's what that is. And that, the 1990s of American rock and roll is worthy of examination for what it was. I mean, 60s into the 70s makes sense. And then the 70s into the 80s, it's like, what? It's like cocaine and technology.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you rebound from that? And then we did.
Yeah,
like good. So if the 90s collection of American rock is worth examining, I mean, the Smashing Pumpkins are a pretty significant piece of that conversation, right?
For sure. And everyone, you got your Nirvanas and and to be honest, that's who at that age I was listening to them more than any of those other bands. But I mean, Smashing Pumpkins, I feel like their sound is more relevant today. Like they're just a little bit different than a lot of those bands, just based on how the guitar playing, guitar tone. Like a lot of those other bands that weren't really big solos wasn't like a thing, and then you got like there's some ripping happening.
Well, how long
here.
is Silverfuck? Like 11 and a half minutes?
Yeah, they got some long one. I feel like Geek USA is kind of a longer song.
None of them are the old 4 minutes and 30 seconds,
right.
Verse, chorus, verse.
Yeah, they're not holding to the standards very often. They're kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's interesting about them.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. It feels like everybody and their mother has an opinion about Billy Corgan and sort of this reputation of being difficult to work with, and everything's got to be perfect. And the buddy that said they're a difficult band to be a fan of said that I might be getting this wrong, but I think this is correct. Go in and record this album as a band, and then he, after the fact, went back in and did every other musician's parts himself.
I feel like that's not super uncommon, though. I've heard of
really.
I mean, it's not.
Why bring everybody together and go in the studio if you're just gonna?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's a dick move, but but I've heard of Dave Grohl did that on one of the first. I think the second Foo. Well, I know he did all of the first Foo Fighters record himself. The second one, he went back in and went over all of William Goldsmith's drumming himself because he didn't feel like he was in time or something like that. And so there was that was when he left the band or whatever, and then Taylor Hawkins came in, I think. But so I know
that would be a band departing move, or
what
you did? What?
Yeah, I was
what you mean I'm not in time?
Middle fingers in the air for sure. You're not leaving happy after that. But yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard that about Billy Corgan, but it doesn't surprise me because I know that he does have kind of a reputation. He's kind of a weird guy. I mean, some of his weird antics I do appreciate, or recently I think he's been on the cover of Fancy Feline, with his cats, and he's also involved in some wrestling league and things like this. So I mean, he's an oddball.
I kind of come and go with having a TikTok presence, and by presence I just mean I'm lurking.
Right?
I'm not. But that thing's algorithm is the best of them out there.
Right.
So at one point, I consumed a little portion of a Billy Corgan interview, and then it was feeding me him, immediately. And they were all peculiar and fascinating and uncomfortable and just a weird amalgamation of feelings.
He's got an uncomfortable aura about him, I would say. Even just his visual presence is kind of jarring in some ways. When he's went through his, he's got the shaved head, and then he's wearing those long cloaks or dresses or whatever. And some of I think that was more late 90s, early 2000s era.
All of that, there is all of that, but there is none of this without him. So, I mean, if you want to pick the Billy Corgan nits, you also got to give him praise where praise is due.
A lot of times the weirdos are the ones that can make the best art. So you got to let them be weird, I guess.
And then we jumped to 2001. Is This It? The Strokes, which was one of 6. For them, 11 tracks, 36 minutes. Got to go all the way back to episode 27, where my guy Dan Gedman had this on his list. And it's the only time a Strokes record has made 2 lists now. And I believe he, I was like, what, a Strokes record for your list? And he was like, man, I feel like they just were able to reach back and get that garage band feel and put it in the forefront of rock again. And I love that shit.
That's how I feel about it. It was almost like a rock and roll renaissance a little bit, because we're talking about weird 90s stuff, after the grunge era or whatever, you get into the rap rock and the Linkin Parks and things like that. And I mean, I was guilty to listening to a little bit of that as well, but this was just a rock and roll renaissance of sorts, just kind of getting back to garage rock, a little bit of television influence and things like that. And it just, I don't know, kind of scratched an itch for me. It kind of got me to a place that I wanted to be. I just found the sound so refreshing. I think what was the Last Night, I think, was the first single off of that record, and this album came out a couple days before I turned 21.
Oh wow.
So I just really, I don't know, it was just it for me. So it was in the rotation pretty heavily at the time, and I still have the record now.
You do?
Yeah.
So 5 others of theirs, are you familiar?
Yeah, I've listened to, I think I've listened to all of their records.
Okay.
The ones, I've listened to the first 2 probably the most out of all of their stuff. But
I feel like they went couple or 3 years between records 1 and 2, and then a few years between 2 and 3, and then there was a slightly bigger, and then all of a sudden they, 7 or 8 or 9 years, and that they put one out not too long ago, right?
Yeah, they had one not too long ago, and I think like Julian Casablancas is doing like The Void, so he had some different outlets that he was creative in, and then like Albert Hammond Jr. released a couple solo records, so I think they're just kind of all doing their own thing a little bit. But yeah, their gaps are getting wider and wider.
Yeah, but
for
I mean,
sure.
you could look at the dates of their releases and confidently say that they're still like there's not been a not like we're done. Like they still are around, right?
Yeah. They're still around. I mean, they're not super over the hill yet. They still got some. They still are rocking a little bit, I think.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, very good stuff. Really appreciate it. I typically wrap with just a quick series of goofy questions, and
Sure.
we'll get you out of here. And so the first is, if we can agree that everybody in some form or another has a personal and a professional bucket list, what are your one spots for each of those?
Well, for a professional bucket list, I mean, it would be to like have a photo on the cover of Rolling Stone. I mean, that would be pretty, I don't know that it's super obtainable, but that would, think of like Mark Selger or something like that, like the classic like Kurt Cobain cover. He's had all sorts of classic covers, but I mean, that would kind of be
That's awesome.
up there for sure.
That is super cool.
Yeah.
And or personal?
For personal, gosh.
I mean, maybe that checks both.
Yeah, I mean, I would be pretty happy. I'd be living all right if I.
Cool. You get to have lunch with anybody, dead or alive. You're choosing. Who is it and why?
Lunch with anybody dead or alive. Oh my gosh. Probably and it doesn't have to be music necessarily.
No, any person.
I mean, I think it would be interesting to have lunch with like Mark Selger or somebody that's been there, like one of these like old, or like there's Henry Diltz would be another one who's kind of from the Laurel Canyon area, but he photographed all those musicians, like Joni Mitchell. He did like the Crosby, Stills, Nash record cover or album cover, and so he would be an interesting because he's probably around 80 years old, and so he's seen and done it all. So actually, I would go with Henry Diltz probably.
So you remind me, start learning about photography and taking courses in high school.
Yeah.
And then in college, not so much.
Yeah, not touching the camera at all for quite a while.
At some point, it sounds like you became a student of the history of photography, or became aware of iconic figures.
Yeah, a little bit. Just over time, you just kind of start, like, you go down a rabbit hole, you see, who took this photo, you see the credit, and you're like, oh, check them out. Like, oh, they've done a ton of work. Or like there's Bob Gruen is I've got like his rock scene. He took like the iconic John Lennon photograph in the New York shirt, the New York skyline in the background. And he's taken like some of the most famous photos, like Tina Turner, just like,
cool.
And so, yeah, you just see like a photo credit or whatever, and then you kind of go down that rabbit hole and learn about that person. It's interesting.
Nice. You're given the opportunity to visit your past self at any age you're choosing. What age are you choosing, and what are you saying?
I mean, I'm probably visiting high school me and saying, go for it. Like, you can do this. And so, I mean, sometimes it bothers me that I have that gap in there to where, that's just how life is or whatever. But, it's like, just go for it.
Well, I do, dorky, hokey, whatever, there's, for me personally, there's always some value, and the value fluctuates in saying and looking at it and to say, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if things didn't go the way that they went.
For sure.
So it's tough because you want to go back and you go, yes, do it.
Right,
but also the life that you lived between.
Your journey's your journey.
Yes.
Like, you can't change it, and you wouldn't be where you are now if you had taken a different fork in the road at any other point.
For sure. Complete this for me, please. The world would immediately become a better place in which to live if only
people would shut up and listen. I don't know. Maybe maybe that was a little too aggressive.
I
But
mean,
yeah, I just everyone seems to have like strong opinions about things that maybe they aren't as educated on as they would like to
I love
put
it.
out there.
I love it. And finally, a true or false. And with your affinity for music and your early photography, cutting your gums, if you
Sure.
will, it is okay and acceptable to wear the T-shirt of the band whose show you're going to.
True.
Okay.
With a caveat. Whatever you're comfortable with,
Yeah,
you do
yeah.
you, I say.
Yes.
I probably wouldn't do it, but
Okay.
if you want to, I say go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's what I say. I know that you like that band because you're at the show that I'm at.
Sure.
So for example, what the heck are Gorilla Pies?
So this is a
Pittsburgh Pirates hat on that?
it's a pizza spot that I hit up in LA. I make a lot of pizzas, and so while I was out there,
From scratch at home?
yeah, I've got like one of those uni ovens.
Nice.
And so I do too much of that. I got into
Okay.
that during the pandemic or whatever. And
Cool.
So, yeah, and so it was a cool pizza spot that I visited out there, and I liked the shirt, so
It's
I copped the shirt.
Super cool
Yeah,
shirt.
and it does have like the Pirates hat on there.
The
or
old
whatever.
school,
yeah,
like Willie Stargell, that roster of the 70s Pirates was like,
yeah.
if I see those guys, I'm crossing the street.
Yeah, there's
like,
some bad dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so dough, water, yeast, salt, oil.
Yeah, and so you got your water, a little bit of yeast. You can put oil in there. Some people put a little bit of sugar in there because it'll help brown the dough a little bit more and give the yeast a little bit more to
Work
to
on.
munch on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, when you made your first dough, are you still using the same recipe, or have you tweaked it?
Oh no, my first dough was ass. It was bad. It was like I found like some internet recipe in there that had me put butter in there, and it was just like real. Like my hydration levels weren't great. So yeah, I'm constantly tweaking what I'm doing, and like a lot of, you've got all your measurements and all that, but I kind of like to freeform it a little bit, which is kind of the opposite of what you're supposed to do as a baker.
Doing this in a stand mixer?
I have a stand mixer that I recently got, like actually just this past Christmas. So I had been by hand up until that point. And so,
did it come with the hook attachment?
Yeah, it's got the hook attachment. So that's
the stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you've been doing this for a while now, I mean, it's got to make your pizza eating experience when you go someplace like you're like something of a critic. You're like, these fucking guys.
Yeah, super into it. I picked out like the places I went to. I knew had pretty strong reputations.
Okay.
And so I like this dude made some really. I mean, all the pizza I had there was really great, but his stood out for sure.
Okay.
He was calling it Pittsburgh style pizza actually, which I guess is like where the Pirates hat came in, but I think the chef, he used to be a chef at Nobu, like an executive chef there, so maybe he was trying to slum it a little bit in the pizza world or something.
Nice.
But his pizza was great.
Cool. Now, I mean, what is your favorite to make or to get while you're out, like style wise, topping wise?
I kind of like a hybrid style, like Lucky Boys has a good pizza. They're down on the West Bottoms, and so it's not like Neapolitan, but it's not New York style. It's kind of a breadier pizza, a little bit, I guess you could say.
Like Detroit?
I do like Detroit.
Okay.
This is a little bit, so it's not a pan pizza. It's still,
Gotcha.
Like you launch it off the paddle or whatever.
Yeah.
So they've got good pies. Providence Pizza here in town. I like their pizza a lot.
Shouts out to Luke and Aaron.
Yeah, great dudes. Pizza Tassio. I like their pizza a lot.
Waldo, kind of.
Yeah,
brand
they're
new.
all. I feel like they're popping up a new one like every other week at this point. So
cool.
Those are kind of some of my favorite pies in town for sure.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. I really appreciate you doing this. ZachBPhotography.com, Zach B Photograph on Twitter, and then just Zach Bauman on Instagram.
Yeah.
I didn't spend a whole lot of time on the website, but at first glance, it looks, I mean, your work is very nice, very handsome.
Oh, right on. Thank you. Yeah.
And so if you need somebody to, do you Are there specific lanes that you like to stay in, or are you just whatever?
I'm kind of all over the place, but I really like portrait photography, and like right now I'm probably known mostly for like in the food photography stuff.
Okay.
But I like what I like about food photography is shooting people. Like I like shooting the chefs or like action shots more so than the actual dishes. So portrait photography is kind of where I would hang my hat. I like
There you
shooting
go.
people.
Cool.
So if you need a shot, I got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. Anything that you had hoped that we might cover that we didn't?
No, I feel like we kind of covered a lot of bases. We talked about photography, music, pizza. I mean, those are the holy trinity for me. So I'm happy with
Right
kind
on.
of what we discussed.
Well, much appreciated, and talk to you soon.
Yeah,
Thanks.
appreciate it.